Hi guys, it's Hannah and welcome to the Dyslexic Reader. Today I'm going to be doing my wrap up for the Reading Rush 2019, and I actually done really well this year. I completed all 7 challenges, I read 7 books, and I read over 2,000 pages, which is crazy to me. I just had a really good start to the week. My Friday, Saturday, Sunday wasn't great because I was busy, but all the rest of the days I got 300 plus pages done every day, and I was just really enjoying it this year. I didn't do any video challenges, I didn't do any Instagram challenges because I just didn't enjoy any of the prompts this year, which was kind of annoying. Just when they released like the video challenge every morning, I was like, I don't really want to do that. So that's kind of unfortunate, but hey ho, you win some, you lose some. So I didn't participate in any of them this year, but maybe that is what gave me more time and motivation to get all my reading done. So I have 7 books to talk about today. One of them is an audiobook, so I'll just put the pictures up and we might as well start with that. It was I'll Be Gone in the Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Hunt for the Golden State Killer, I believe is the full title. I'll put it up here, by Michelle McNamara. This was a true crime, not a non-fiction book about the Golden State Killer and Michelle McNamara's hunt to find him. She did a lot of research into the case, worked with the police, wrote the book like as she was going, was obsessed with the case. She died very suddenly, but her friends and family finished and put the book together and released it, and very shortly after the book was released they actually caught the Golden State Killer and found them, so that was nice. I enjoyed the writing of this. I feel like it was very respectful of the victims, which was nice to see in a true crime. But the second half was great when they were like going through like catching him, but the first half of the book, which was mostly the timeline of the killer, I didn't find that interesting. I didn't really think that the story was that interesting, but also the timeline jumped. It was like 1976, 1998, 1983, 1986, 1980, 1979, 1992. It just like jumped back and forward so much, and it was really hard, and I was having to stop and go, right, so we're now after this point but before this point, but then there was other points you hadn't heard, so you couldn't really like put it into context. So I found that part of the story hard to listen to. But Michelle's story was actually really interesting, and about how she worked with the police and all the evidence and how it all like came together in the end was really interesting. And yeah, as I said, it was really respectful to the victims, which I think is sometimes hard to do. And when you're focusing on such like violent crimes, it's very easy to sensationalize it. So overall, I think it was well done. I think I gave it a 4 stars. The 1 star that it lost for me was just at the start. It was just kind of losing me with the jumping about, but I did really enjoy it. And if you're into true crime, this is definitely one I would suggest, even if the case isn't 100% your thing. Just the writing and the kind of aura around the book was really good, and it made it really enjoyable. So that was my challenge for 5 words in the cover. Then we have my shortest book. I always like to get like a wee short book in so that I can read it really quick and then feel like I'm ahead of myself. This was one of the Penguin Mini Modern Classics, and this was Why Do You Wear a Cheap Watch by Hans Fallada. This was for the challenge of a book you meant to read last year. I bought this last year. I bought a collection of these mini classics last year. I think it was last year they came out, or maybe the year before. And when they came out, I went through and picked all the ones that I was interested in and ordered them. So I've been meaning to read this since I bought it. And it had 3 short stories about pre-war Germany. And unfortunately, I only gave this a 2 star. There was 3 stories: Why Do You Wear a Cheap Watch, War Monument or Urinal, and 50 Marks and a Merry Christmas. And the only one I liked was Do You Wear a Cheap Watch, which was only like 8 pages long. Yeah, not even 6 pages long. So out of this, there was only 6 pages of the story that I actually liked. War Monument or Urinal I thought was interesting, but not really like, I didn't really like the writing style. And 50 Marks and a Merry Christmas, I just kind of thought didn't really have much of a point or a message to it. So kind of a letdown for this one, but I definitely am glad that I finally got to it. And the Why Do I Wear a Cheap Watch, the principal story, was actually really good and interesting. Now let's move on. The next challenge was to read an author's first book, published work. I can't remember the exact wording of it, but I went with Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I have this hideous edition, which was clearly a school's edition that someone never gave back. There was some underlinings in it. The only annotation they made was they underlined one sentence and wrote unladylike beside it, and they also inscribed mega bored on the bottom of the edges here. So this was clearly a school edition that was just never returned and ended up in a charity shop, and I picked it up cheap. I have never read Jane Eyre. I've seen a couple of the movie TV adaptations, and this was fantastic. This was a 5-star read. I absolutely loved it. It was more kind of a focus on her whole life, rather than, I think, the movies focus more into the relationship side, which you can understand why. But this was kind of more of like a broader scope of a story, which I really enjoyed. I thought the writing were really nice. I thought the characters were really deep and well developed. I really hated Mr. Rivers, who only came in like the last third man. And they were kind of like, yeah, but he's a good guy, I didn't see any good in him. I thought he was absolutely horrid. But yeah, I think the characters were really deep, but there was a lot of grey morality around the whole kind of thing. And I liked in the relationship as well, like, it wasn't like this swoon-worthy, like, rich man. They were blatant. They were like, he's ugly. No one would really say he was overly attractive physically, but for some reason she was attracted to him, and personality-wise, they really clicked and just enjoyed each other's company, and I thought that was nice and refreshing to see from like a romance point of view, rather than just the physical attraction and then learning to love them or whatever coming afterwards. So I thoroughly enjoyed this, and for any people who do like classic literature and you haven't got around to this yet, bump it up your list because it really is worth it. Then for my read a book and then watch the movie adaptation, I read Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, and the movie is called The Secrets of NIMH. And I really enjoyed this. I have seen the movie a bazillion times, and I have read the book a bazillion times because it's probably in my top 5 books of all time. I absolutely love this book. For anyone who doesn't know, it is a story about Mrs. Frisby, who's a mouse. Her husband is dead and her son Timothy is really sick, and she's trying to make him better and take care of him. And there's rats that live nearby, and they're a bit unusual for rats, and she has to go for them for help, and they're connected to her husband, and this whole big story comes out. But not only is it well written, I think it's really thought-provoking. It is definitely a book and a movie that I would use with children to talk about certain topics that are brought up in the book. I think it's really well done. I have never read the book and watched the movie within a close time frame of each other, and it was really interesting to read the book and then watch the movie like the next day. There's a magical element in the movie which isn't in the books, which I don't really like. I feel like in the books it's more just like intelligence, and that's how they get about, and I would rather that in the movie, like, it was more just like intelligence rather than they had some sort of super magical powers, which isn't a big part of the movie. It is more intelligence, but I like the magical element not to be there. But I prefer the character of Auntie Shrew in the movies. I think her character and the way she's more involved is way more fun, and the movie is stunning. If you're a fan of animation and you haven't seen The Secret of NIMH or any of Don Bluth's work, look up a list of Don Bluth movies. His animation is beyond beautiful. They're just nice to look at even if you're not into the story. But again, this was a 5-star for like the bazillionth time of reading it, and I would also recommend this to anyone who's a fan of children's literature, or if you have watched the movie but haven't read the book. The book has a lot more backstory of the rats in it as well, which is really fun after watching the movie to like know all of the workings from behind the scenes. For my book with purple on the cover, I read Beetle Queen by M.G. Leonard, and this is the second in the series. I think the series is called The Battle of the Beetles. And the first one is about a young boy whose father goes missing, and he studies beetles, and then they kind of look into it, and there's like super beetles that like help them fight the baddie kind of type thing. And this is the second, so I don't really want to say what happens in this book because I think it'll spoil the first book. But I read the first book last month, and I'm reading this, and I'm going to read probably the third book in the series, which is the last. I think it's only a trilogy in August, because I'm just really enjoying these. They're really fun, lighthearted, easy to read. The characters are really good in them, and it's just something a wee bit different. So I'm thoroughly enjoying these, and I think I give this a 4-star, if I remember correctly. This was probably my least liked book of the readathon. This was If You Find This by Matthew Baker, and I did not really enjoy this. This was my book for to read in like one place, and I read it in bed. Like, I read a wee bit like every night, and I did not enjoy this. It was about this boy whose grandfather was missing and then comes back, and he's got some sort of dementia or Alzheimer's and can't really remember things, but he remembers that there was these family heirlooms that were buried, and they go on a quest to find them. But the characters were quite good. There was quite a lot of like diversity and depth to the characters, which I enjoyed, but the story wasn't interesting. Like, the writing wasn't overly good. I thought the pacing was kind of weird. I just overall didn't enjoy the book, and this was probably the book I was least looking forward to as well. I kind of knew that there was a chance that it would be a flop. I thought parts of it were just stupid. But the characters were good, and if you ever see this about and read the blurb, I'm not going to read it now. I think I read it in my TBR for the readathon, so if you want to go back and look at that, if you want to like hear more about this book. If the synopsis sounds interesting to you, it does have really good characters in it, but it just, the story and the writing just was not for me. And my last book, which I've left to the last, it was also the last book I read. I just finished it last night. I just devoured this thing. It was probably one of my best books of the year so far, was The Land of Neverendings by Kate Saunders. This book was so incredibly deep and moving and beautiful and imaginative and funny and endearing, and just everything that a really good middle grade book should be, in my opinions. I did read the back of this in my TBR video if you want to go back and look at it, but really it does not do it justice. It talks about a land where toys are alive. So this was my book with a non-human main character because it was toys, but there is Emily, our main character, in it, and she kind of going on the back can go to this toyland. It's so much more than this. Our main character Emily had a elder sister, Holly, who passes away before the start of the book. Holly was 15 and had a lot of disabilities. It doesn't go into exactly what she had, but she seems to be quite severely physically and mentally disabled. And obviously the whole family is coping with this death. And Holly had this bear called Bluey, and Emily used to act out like wee stories and put on a voice and do wee funny dances for Holly, which she really enjoyed. But Holly and Bluey were cremated, and Emily misses obviously them both, but she has like this special like thing about Bluey, and she notes down little like memories of him in the book to try and like keep all the memories alive. But toys start coming alive, and it turns out that all the stories that Emily had been telling Holly over the years of like where the toys lived is actually a true place, and some sort of magic is broken, and they're kind of like seeping into the real world, and bad is seeping into the toy world, and Emily has to try to save it all because Bluey and Holly are now in this land of never ending, and she wants to keep the place like a really happy place for them. And there's other characters in the stories who have lost loved ones and lost toys at a young age, and I think for a child or parent or a friend of somebody who has lost a sibling, this is a really, really, really good book. I would have before this said There's a Castle by Piers Torday would be my favourite middle grade book for dealing with grief, but this has skyrocketed beyond. This book is a 6 out of 5 stars. I would recommend it to absolutely anyone, even if you don't read middle grade. I don't know if it was maybe a bit close to home with me. If you don't remember from watching my channel, or you haven't been watching for a long time, just over a year ago my best friend's daughter, who was very severely disabled, died, and she was only 11 years old, and that has obviously been very hard for everyone to cope with. And when I started this book I almost contemplated putting it down because it felt a bit too close to home for me, and I felt like I maybe wasn't ready to read that kind of material yet. But the book was so good and endearing and deep, but yet not traumatic, and it did talk about sad feelings and when someone leaves wanting to die just to be with them again and all those kind of things. It brings them up, but it's not done in like a really deep sad way, which I think is perfect for a children's book. So it was actually, I think, a really good thing for me to read this book, and I felt like it was good for me, and I feel like it would be really good for anyone else. Kate Saunders' son actually died. There was a wee afterword at the end which had me bawling. Her son died when he was 19, and she keeps like his toys, and that was the inspiration for this book. And she says in the back here, the death of a child or a young person is a rare thing in this part of the world, and children who have lost a sibling or a parent can feel lonely, mostly because people don't know how to talk about it. And then it goes in to talk about Winston's Wish, which is a charity which helps with bereaved children. I think that is such a true thing. It's very hard to experience and talk about the death of a young person in the Western world, certainly, because it is thankfully a very rare thing, but I think that can make it harder when it happens because there's less people that know how to talk to you, how to deal with you, that can sympathize with you and stuff like that. So I think this is a really important topic to deal with, and I have been ranting about this book so much more. I may do a full review about this book. This is a library book that I got, but I will be buying my own copy because this book is just so stunning that I need to have it with me, and it is definitely a book that I intend to reread over and over and over and over again. And I urge anybody who this has resonated with at all to go and check this book out from your library, see if it's on Audible, see if you can buy it secondhand if you can't go out and buy it. Because it really is a story that is worth reading and worth sharing. So that is my 6 books plus my audiobook that I read for the reading rush of 2019. My actual like general TBR for the month will be going up tomorrow. So I read another 4 books at the start of this month. So if you want to hear more about them, tune in tomorrow. I hope you're all happy, I hope you're all healthy, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow for my main wrap up. Goodbye.